Welcome to Using the Guide to Recovery Programs. The guide was developed for your use by the Federal Emergency Management Agency under the National Disaster Recovery Framework. One purpose of the framework is to promote effective community disaster recovery for the long term. In this way, it looks beyond what might be considered traditional disaster recovery assistance. The framework calls for collaboration among all levels of government, as well as the private sector or other partners, to restore, redevelop, and revitalize disaster-affected communities. The ultimate goal is to build a more resilient nation. As you will learn in this 12-minute presentation, the resources included in the guide are not only for communities recovering from a disaster, but also for those who are seeking to build stronger, smarter, and safer. Most everyone is aware that FEMA and other state and federal agencies assist residents and communities affected by federally declared disasters. The Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, known simply as the Stafford Act, is the law under which federal disaster assistance is administered. But this assistance can only go so far. Communities still must work together, now including partners under the National Disaster Recovery Framework, to restore, redevelop, and revitalize the fabric of the community. During this presentation, we're going to take a look at why guides to recovery programs are created, what they contain, and who they are created for. We'll also take a quick look inside a guide in order to help you, the user, understand the vast resources available at your fingertips. Regardless of how hard a community might work to recover from a disaster, developing strategies for long-term rebuilding might require technical assistance. And locating sources of funding to see projects through can be especially challenging. The Guide to Recovery Programs is a toolkit of resources containing funding sources and other support to help disaster-affected communities, as well as communities that are planning ahead in preparation for potential disasters. The guides are custom developed and designed for specific states. In FEMA Region 6, a new guide has been developed since Hurricane Isaac struck Louisiana in August of 2012. Additional guides may be developed in other states as disaster situations warrant and the National Disaster Recovery Framework is put into place. We are using the Louisiana Guide as an example in this presentation. The guides are designed to be low-tech for easy access and ease of use online. In fact, once you have downloaded the document, you only need to know how to use the search feature to find specific information. The guides, which are presented as a PDF file, contain hundreds of profiles of specific resources. The Louisiana Guide identifies more than 800 potential sources of grants and loans, including forgivable loans, from select federal and state programs, foundations, corporate giving programs, and nonprofit organizations that offer programs to help facilitate community recovery. The documents include funding sources available under the Stafford Act so that local officials are aware of the full range of programs. The guides, however, focus primarily on non-Stafford Act funding sources. Information about potential technical assistance, such as architectural design, engineering consultation, or even administrative assistance is also provided. To compile the information, we screen thousands of possible sources in order to ensure the data is accurate and relevant at the time it's compiled. The goal is to provide the best possible compilation of resources to save you and your community great time and effort. The guides are created to assist communities in their long-term recovery and rebuilding efforts. They are not designed for individual homeowners or renters. For example, they can assist a local government in locating resources to help develop affordable housing or green spaces in the community. But they are not intended to address the informational needs of individual residents seeking to repair or rebuild their homes. The guides are designed to be easily searchable using keywords: housing, smart growth, sustainable, green space or open space, and disaster recovery are a few examples, but there are literally hundreds of keywords you can use to search the guide. One of the best ways to look for funding resources is to search by sector. In fact, many of the projects that communities have in their recovery plans are categorized according to areas of focus. The document is organized into 9 sectors. These include agricultural and environment, economic and workforce development, education, floodplain management, historical and cultural resources. Other sectors are housing and community development, human services and public health, infrastructure and transportation, And finally, public safety. Who are the guide's intended audiences? When a community chooses to implement the National Disaster Recovery Framework to help facilitate its long-term recovery from a disaster, FEMA and other state and federal agencies support the local effort to identify needs and perhaps to develop a long-term recovery vision. County or parish and municipal governments, therefore, will find the guide extremely useful as they take steps to carry out the vision. They are also ideal for elected or appointed officials and city or community planners. In addition, tribal and state governments will find useful information, as will grant writers and managers, and nonprofit organizations and civic groups. The guides also can be used by project champions. Project champion is a term often used for individuals or groups who volunteer to take ownership of a recovery or rebuilding project. They typically see to it that key stakeholders and community members keep up the momentum and that recovery initiatives are carried through to completion. They are often community leaders, committee chairs, or business owners. Sometimes an entire citizens committee that is leading a local initiative or developing projects under the National Disaster Recovery Framework is considered the project champion. Other people who may be interested in the information found in the guide are local economic development corporations, chambers of commerce, and key stakeholders such as departmental employees, like a public works planner. Let's take a look at putting the resources to use. Obviously, one of the best reasons to use a guide is to help communities recover and rebuild from the effects of a disaster. But they can also be used to pre-plan for recovery initiatives. Moreover, they give the user an overview of the vast number of resources available. And they could be very beneficial for those wanting to enhance an existing development or recovery plan. Finally, they are a great resource to use if your community wants to jumpstart a community redevelopment project that perhaps never got off the ground because of the challenging task of finding resources. Now let's take a closer look at locating the Louisiana file online. If you arrived at this presentation by clicking on FEMA.gov Disaster 4080, this is the screen you first saw. Once you are on this site, click on the phrase where the arrow is pointing, Louisiana Guide to Recovery Programs. Once you download the document from the next screen, you'll have full access to the guide. It's that easy. As you'll see, the table of contents is extensive and identifies a wide selection of resources. Community Development Block Grants, Louisiana Small Business Development Centers, the Procter & Gamble Fund, and Rebuilding Together are just a few of the hundreds of resources listed. Now we'll look at a sample profile. This particular one is for the Union Pacific Foundation. If you had begun at the table of contents and clicked on the words Union Pacific Foundation, the guide would have brought you directly to this page. Or you could have used the search tool on your computer, typed in the words Union Pacific, and you would have been taken to the Union Pacific page. All of the profiles are categorized the same way for ease of use and clarity. For instance, they all have a purpose and funding priorities section. This example shows that Union Pacific requires that grants be awarded through nonprofit organizations that are located in Union Pacific communities. In this particular profile, the bullet points reference the Foundation's specific funding priorities, such as community and civic and health and human services. We should point out that not every resource provides all of these details. The next categories are the eligibility criteria and the application deadline. This is very important information considering how competitive many foundations and corporate giving programs are, and the time and work it takes to get a grant application ready for submission. Finally, and perhaps just as important or valuable, is the contact information, a hyperlink to the website, and the primary sectors of giving. As mentioned earlier, all of the information in the guide was current and accurate at the time it was created. However, people change jobs, businesses move, and websites find new domains. Please remember to verify the information before proceeding too far. Many of the profiles also contain a hyperlink to the foundation or company website, and oftentimes the link will take you directly to the funding application page. This hyperlink can be found at the bottom of the profile. This page provides all the links where you can access the Louisiana Guide. It can be found on FEMA's Hurricane Isaac webpage, as well as on the website of the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. As other community resources are produced and approved by FEMA state partners, they may also be posted online. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback on the guide, please contact Charlie Cook or Wayne Rickard at the email address shown here. We would appreciate hearing from you once you've had a chance to use these resources, as your input will help us improve future editions. Additional information about FEMA and its many programs is available on our main website at fema.gov, on Facebook, and on Twitter. We hope you have found this presentation helpful and that you now understand why these resources are created, what they contain, and how they can help your community. At FEMA, we support our citizens and first responders to ensure that as a nation we work together to build, sustain, and improve our capability to prepare for, protect against, respond to, recover from, and mitigate all hazards. We wish you the best success in your community's efforts to fully recover from a disaster and to rebuild stronger, smarter, and safer.